Welcome to True Tears Stories. Please like this video and subscribe to True Tears Stories. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Michael had learned long ago that in his family, being quiet meant being agreeable. He wasn't raised to cause a scene. His mother used to say, "Let people show you who they are, then step back." But she never said what to do when everyone else refuses to see it. It started with Kayla. Kayla was beautiful, clever, and always 2 steps ahead in conversation. She married Michael's younger brother, Drew, 3 years ago in a vineyard wedding that looked like a magazine spread. Ever since, Kayla had become the darling of the family. She made Pinterest-worthy desserts for holidays, laughed just a little too loudly at Dad's jokes, and managed to convince their mother to switch her famous stuffing recipe. Everyone adored her, except Michael. It wasn't that he disliked her exactly. It was more a sense, an unease that curled around his ribs every time she looked at him with that perfectly poised smile, like she knew something he didn't, like he was the butt of a joke whispered just out of earshot. No one else seemed to notice it, not his dad, who constantly asked for her opinion on wine, not his sister, who called Kayla her bonus best friend, and certainly not Drew, who looked at her like she was spun from stardust. Michael had tried to ignore it. He really had, until Thanksgiving. That year, they were hosting at his parents' house, something that hadn't happened since their mom's knee replacement. The whole family pitched in, or at least claimed to. Michael arrived early to help with setup, and as he walked through the door, he overheard Kayla in the kitchen, her voice hushed but clear. "I'm just saying, it's sad he never figured out how to grow up," she was saying, always floating around, always the outsider, like some lost little puppy. She was talking to someone on the phone. Her tone was casual, cutting. Michael didn't say anything that day. He went through the motions, carving turkey, pouring wine, laughing at the right moments. But her words clanged in his ears with every clink of silverware. A week later, his mother called him, gently hinting that Kayla had mentioned he seemed down and maybe uncomfortable with the new family dynamic. That was when something hardened in him. He started watching more closely. Kayla was subtle, masterful. She'd phrase things in a way that made her sound concerned, but left just enough room for judgment. "I love how Michael doesn't care what anyone thinks about his job." Or, "He's always had a different kind of energy, so creative." It never sounded malicious, not unless you knew how to listen. And Michael was listening now. He told himself he was being paranoid, but the little things added up. Kayla complimented his ex-girlfriend on Instagram 2 days after they broke up. She made a point of bringing up Michael's short-lived stint living in his car after grad school, only to follow it with, "But look how far you've come." Still, every time he tried to bring it up, the family waved him off. "She just jokes like that," his sister said. "You're overthinking it," Drew added. "She loves you," their mom insisted. So Michael stopped talking and started recording. It wasn't some elaborate setup, just an old voice-activated recorder he tucked under the sideboard in his parents' living room one Sunday. He told himself it was about protecting himself, but part of him knew he just needed to hear it again, to confirm he wasn't imagining the manipulation. What he didn't expect was what he caught. That evening, The family gathered for dinner. Michael stepped outside to take a call. When he returned, Kayla and Drew were still sitting with his parents. The recorder, forgotten by everyone else, clicked quietly in the corner. Later that night, back at his apartment, he listened. Kayla's voice, clear and sharp. Michael is always playing victim. It's exhausting. He doesn't realize we're all just humoring him. He'll never actually do anything with his life. He just wants attention. His mother laughed, uncomfortably, but she laughed. Drew chimed in softly. He's still figuring things out. Kayla responded, He's almost 40. How long is that going to take? Michael sat frozen. Not because he was surprised, but because he finally had the truth in his hands. Unpolished, unfiltered. And this time, it wasn't just Kayla. It was all of them. Not one of them defended him, not really. They all backed her, until they heard the tape. Michael didn't sleep that night. He lay in the quiet of his apartment, the hum of the fridge filling in for all the words he didn't know how to say. The audio file played again and again in his head, even though he'd turned off the recorder hours earlier. It wasn't just what Kayla had said. It was the way his family let her say it, the way their silence folded around her words like an invitation. He thought about deleting the file, thought about pretending he never heard it. But the truth was out now, and no matter how badly he wanted to crawl back into the warmth of denial, he couldn't unhear what had been said. So he did the unthinkable. He backed up the file to a secure drive, sent a copy to himself, and titled it simply, Living Room, Sunday. Then he did something even more surprising. He made a plan. The next family dinner came sooner than expected. His mom's birthday. Kayla had volunteered to host, of course. She always did now. It gave her home field advantage. Michael showed up early again, a bottle of wine in hand, and a polite smile stretching tight across his face. Kayla greeted him like always, with a warm hug and a compliment that made his skin itch. Wow, you're looking very put together tonight, she said, eyes flicking over his clothes like she was assessing a car that had just come through the wash. Thanks, he replied. Thought I'd try something new. Dinner started off uneventfully. Kayla told a story about work. Drew talked about a trip they were planning. Michael played along, polite and engaged, even laughing when appropriate. But beneath it all, a storm was tightening in his chest. Then came the moment. They were finishing dessert when Kayla launched into a gentle roast of Michael's latest freelance job. I think it's so cool you're doing voiceover stuff now, she said sweetly. That's what, your 5th career pivot? I love how fearless you are with starting over. Michael smiled. Thanks, he said. Speaking of new projects, I actually brought something with me tonight. He pulled out his phone. Everyone paused. It's a little audio file, he continued, tapping the screen, from a few Sundays ago, something I thought we could all hear together. The air shifted. Chairs creaked. Someone cleared their throat. Kayla tilted her head. Oh? What is it? She asked, her voice still dipped in honey. Michael didn't answer. He hit play. The living room filled with the unmistakable sound of Kayla's voice. Clear, smooth, and cruel. Every word landed like a stone. Michael is always playing victim. It's exhausting. He doesn't realize we're all just humoring him. He'll never actually do anything with his life. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. His mother blinked rapidly, her mouth halfway open. Drew stared down at the table. Kayla's face turned to stone, every part of her going still, but her eyes, which darted toward the door, the window, anywhere but Michael's. "No one said that," she breathed, too quietly. Michael set the phone down, calmly. "You did, and no one stopped you." The silence thickened. His mother started to speak. Something about context, about stress, about maybe being taken out of proportion. But even she sounded unsure of her own footing now. Michael didn't raise his voice. He didn't cry. He simply looked around the table at the people he had once believed would always have his back. "I'm not here for apologies," he said quietly. "I just wanted the truth to be out loud for once." Kayla looked like she was about to argue, to deny or spin it somehow. But for the first time, the words didn't come. They all backed her until the truth played in their own voices. Michael stood, picked up his coat, and nodded once to the room. "I'll see you when I see you," and then he walked out. Outside, the air hit different, cooler, cleaner, like it had been waiting for him to breathe it properly. For the first time in years, he felt seen. Not by them, but by himself. He didn't know what the next chapter looked like. Not exactly, but he knew it would start with space, with boundaries, with no more pretending. And in that moment, it was enough. Michael expected fallout. He expected calls, messages, maybe a dramatic confrontation at his doorstep. But what came instead was silence. A cold, vacuum-sealed kind of silence that seemed carefully curated, like they were all quietly waiting to see if he'd break the unspoken rule of the family. Never disrupt the story we tell about ourselves. A few days passed, and then his mother texted, not to ask how he was, not to acknowledge what happened, just a brief, "Are you coming to Dad's retirement dinner? Kayla's reserving the back room at that seafood place you like." He didn't answer. Michael sat on his balcony that evening, watching the lights of the city blink to life, and tried to untangle the knot still lodged in his chest. He wasn't angry anymore. Not exactly. But there was a heaviness he couldn't name. It was grief, maybe. Not for losing them. For realizing he never truly had them the way he thought he did. A week later, Drew reached out. "Hey, man, listen. That night got weird. I think Kayla was just venting, you know? We all say stuff sometimes." Michael stared at the message, thumb hovering. He didn't respond. It wasn't just what they said. It was the fact that no one had ever stopped her. Not that night, not any night before. He kept thinking about all the times he'd been made to feel like the unstable one, the difficult one, the overly sensitive one, when really, he'd just been the one without a script, while the rest of them had rehearsed their lines to perfection. He started writing again, not for clients, for himself. Stories, dialogues, scenes he'd lived, but never allowed himself to feel fully. In the quiet of his apartment, with nothing but the soft hum of his desk lamp and the rhythmic tap of his fingers on the keyboard, Michael began to excavate his truth. One night, he wrote about Kayla, not just what she said, but what it felt like to be small under someone else's smile, to watch your own reflection dim in their presence, and think maybe it was your fault. Maybe you were born dull. He didn't name names, but the words were honest. That post went live on a quiet Sunday. He didn't expect it to resonate, but it did. Within days, hundreds of people commented, strangers mostly, sharing their own stories of being gaslit by those who called themselves family. of being told they were too much, too little, too needy, too dramatic. And just like that, Michael wasn't invisible anymore. He was building something. He turned his little blog into a weekly letter. Echoes from the Quiet Room, he called it. Raw, real, and always written with compassion for the parts of ourselves we hide just to be accepted by people who never deserved the privilege. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't bitterness. It was reclamation. Of voice, of space, of story. And with every word, he felt lighter, stronger, more himself than he'd ever allowed himself to be at those tightly scripted dinner tables. Then, out of nowhere, a comment appeared that stopped him cold. You know, I used to be her friend. She did the same thing to me. Thank you for making me feel less alone. It wasn't signed, just a screen name. But Michael had a guess. The silence from his family stretched on, occasionally punctuated by bland updates or impersonal forwards from his mother. He never responded, not because he didn't care, but because he finally understood something. Staying in a toxic story to keep the peace wasn't kindness. It was surrender, and he was done surrendering. One morning, his phone rang. It was his father. Michael let it go to voicemail. Later, he listened to the message. His dad's voice was steady, if slightly uncertain. I don't know everything that happened, son, but maybe we should talk. Just you and me. Michael didn't know what he would say. He wasn't sure if he wanted a reconciliation or if one was even possible. But he did know this. The boy who once sat quiet at the end of the table, folding himself into smaller shapes just to be welcome, wasn't in charge anymore. He had grown into something sturdier, something whole. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth listening to. Michael didn't call back right away. He let his father's message settle, like sediment in still water. He played it twice more, each time searching for something. Remorse, sincerity, a crack in the armor. But the tone was neutral, almost businesslike. It left him more cautious than hopeful. Instead of responding, he returned to his writing. He poured the uncertainty into the next week's letter, about how sometimes healing means not answering the door right away, even when someone knocks with flowers in hand. And it struck a nerve. Dozens of messages poured in again, from people wrestling with the same question. What do you do when the person asking for a second chance never took the time to understand the first mistake? That week, Michael found himself standing in the back row at a small poetry reading hosted by a friend of a friend. The venue was cozy, just mismatched chairs, soft lighting, and a little wooden stage with a microphone that squeaked when touched. He hadn't planned to speak, but when someone didn't show, the host motioned to him with a hopeful smile. He read a piece about silence, how the loudest things often happen in quiet spaces, about Kayla, about secrets that wear smiles, and how sometimes pressing play on the truth is the only way to stop pretending. When he finished, the room was still. Then, gentle applause. A woman approached him afterward. She was in her 60s, with warm eyes and a firm handshake. That felt like you pulled it right out of my chest, she said. Have you ever thought about teaching? There's a community writing program for adults. I think they'd love you. Michael blinked. A laugh rose in his throat, quiet and amazed. He said yes. And so, one evening a week, he began teaching in a room above a tiny library on the east side. It wasn't flashy. The chairs creaked. The coffee came from an old drip machine that smelled faintly burnt. But the people who came brought stories that mattered, stories they hadn't known they were allowed to tell. Michael watched them open up. First a word, then a paragraph, then a flood. And he realized this was what he'd been chasing all along. Not recognition, not even justice, just the space to be honest and to help others do the same. Then, one evening, Kayla showed up. She stood at the back of the classroom, arms crossed, eyes uncertain. She didn't say anything until the class filed out. Then she stepped forward, awkward and defensive. "Nice place," she said, voice cool. "Saw your blog. Thought I'd see for myself." Michael kept his expression even, calm, grounded. "Kayla," he said softly, "this isn't a performance. If you're here to learn something, stay. If you're here to test me, leave." She blinked, as if he'd spoken a different language, but she didn't leave. She sat at the back for the next 3 classes, silent, notebook closed. Then one night, without preamble, she stood and read a piece about a girl who learned to weaponize charm before she learned to tie her shoes. A girl who lied to feel loved and then lied some more to stay loved. When she finished, she sat down quickly. No one clapped. No one had to. Afterward, she met Michael's eyes, and for the first time, he saw something unfamiliar in them. Shame. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet, real kind. The kind that might someday become change. He didn't forgive her. Not instantly. Not fully. But he did something else. He nodded. And they left it there. Later that month, Michael got a second voicemail from his father. It was short. "I read your post about the dinner. I didn't know. I should have. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. For real this time." This one didn't sound like business, and maybe one day Michael would call him back. But for now, he walked home from the library under a low sky, his bag heavy with drafts and notebooks and stories still unfolding. He wasn't waiting for apologies anymore. He was writing his own ending. Michael's apartment felt different now. Not because anything had changed in the furniture or the lighting, but because something inside him had shifted. The air seemed lighter, as if the walls were holding less of his tension and more of his truth. He still kept the hidden recorder tucked in his desk drawer, not out of spite, but as a reminder. Of the day everything cracked open. Of what happened when he finally stopped trying to be the calm one, the quiet one, the one who swallowed discomfort to keep others comfortable. Some nights, he'd reread the stories his students submitted, each one like a little piece of armor falling off. Women writing about second chances they never got. Men discovering their softer voices after a lifetime of being told to be hard. One wrote about watching a friend slowly fade into dementia, and another about coming out at 70. Each one peeled back something, even in him, and he realized this was the slowest kind of justice, but maybe the most lasting. He didn't need Kayla to explain herself again. He didn't need his father to fill in all the gaps. What he needed was exactly what he was building. Something honest, something new, something built without performance. There were still days the doubt crept in. Was he too harsh? Too soft? Too late? But then someone would stop him in the grocery store and say, "I read your story. It helped me say something I've never said before." And that's when he knew. He was living his truth, not for revenge, not for applause, but because it made room for others to live theirs. And for a man who once thought silence was survival, that was more than enough.